All right, it's 12 o'clock. I still see people coming in, but let's just get started. I'm Henriette and Ouden. I work here at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Where I work is actually not this building. We almost live at a small farm which is outside of the city of Princess Anne. And I'm responsible for the herb garden here, and I train farmers and backyard gardens on growing herbs, processing them, and getting licenses and marketing and basically everything if you want to grow medicinal herbs. Let's go to the next page. I have to say this program event is supported in part by iFarms 2, which is a USDA grant, together with some Maryland state money. All right, we can start. This field that you see here, this was, I need to apologize first of all for the technical issues we had with the 2 weeks ago program. At that time, there was a lot of snow. I took this photo. This is the area that will be filled with elderberry plants, hopefully. So there is some work to do here. Snow actually it has been really good for the land. It protects it. Oops. All right, the agenda for today. Let me remove myself. Agenda for today, what you need to know about medicinal herbs. So this is the first in a series of 4. This is a really basic class with some things you just have to know in order to be able to grow high quality herbs. So that's more than just growing herbs, it's growing high quality herbs. Timing is all. You plant them too early, they die. You can plant them too late, you don't get a harvest. No matter what you grow, you will need to have this. Those are things that you actually will have, like tools. We'll end up with setting up a calendar for 5 different herbs that you can grow. And then we create an annual calendar which shows you what steps to take now, what steps to take next month, and what steps to take in July, and what this means for your planning. Questions are going to be at the end. Also, if you have a question, please put them in the chat. And hopefully I will see it. Otherwise, Crystal is in the background. She will help me with chats if I don't see the chats. Yes, this is an important part. I found this very important. What is a medicinal herb? In case you wonder, this is a passion flower, one of my favorite plants. What makes a plant a medicinal herb? Basically, what is the difference between a medicinal herb and a vegetable? And let me just get this all up. There's 2 different metabolites in plants, primary metabolites and secondary metabolites. Primary metabolites are the things we all know. When we buy food, it says how much proteins, how much lipids are in the plant or in the food. That's basically why we eat. It's the nutrition. The secondary metabolites are molecules playing a role in the evolutionary adjustment. Basically what it is, it's the molecules, the constituents that have been growing in this plant for over the centuries or ages that it has been growing. While it grows and it creates a next generation, every generation is stronger than the generation before. And they basically adjust to the circumstances, which means if you grow a plant in a very dry, desert-like circumstances, the only ones that will survive are the ones that are growing in the dry, desert-like circumstances. Same for oregano, for instance. Oregano does well in warm, humid, moist areas, and it has adjusted to that environment. That means that it developed secondary metabolites. The secondary metabolites are the medicinal value for humans and for animals. The like an oregano, it is able to fight off a fungus, because in the natural environment there are a lot of fungi, and it's able to sustain itself, which means that's the reason, one of the reasons you want to use oregano. It prevents you from getting a fungus. I have to say, I have to be careful. You can never make this statement. You have to be very careful what you're saying. When we talk about herbs, we'll talk more about it. You cannot make any medicinal claim, and that's exactly what I just did. Sorry. Herb growers focus on secondary metabolites. This is also why for some experienced vegetable growers, it's hard to switch over to medicinal herbs, because in this case, it's not about how does a plant look. Are the leaves big? Are the flowers beautiful? It is about the content of the plant, the invisible elements of the plant, which means when you grow a plant, you have to imitate the natural circumstances this plant normally grows in. Checking the chat, no questions. For anybody joining later, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. This gorgeous flower is a black cohorse flower. Black cohorse is a very popular plant used for menopausal issues. And many people want to grow it just because it's a very valuable plant. Naturally, black cohorse grows in on the shoreline of creeks in shady woodlands. It does not grow naturally in a field on the eastern shore where 5 years before corn was grown. And you can grow it on that field, but because it's not in natural circumstances, it's not going to be as valuable as what you want it to be. And you might be able to sell the rhizomes of the plant, but are they really good? No, they're not really good. And we don't want to bring medicinal herbs on the market that are not really high quality. So one thing, when you start growing your plants, know where they flourish naturally. Know what soil they're growing. Very important, do they naturally require sun or shade, or do they do anyhow? Do they always do well? If you grow peppermint in the sun, they won't do well. And the taste is also changing because it will get too strong. The climate, well, that makes sense for everybody, I think. If you have the wrong climate, the plant's not going to grow. Humidity, moisture. What season, of course, when you start growing, you need to know when is it growing. Is a chamomile, can I grow chamomile in the middle of the summer? No, you cannot. This doesn't have much to do with the quality. That's really a matter of, it's just not, it's too hot. What elevation? This is a fascinating thing for me. If you have a high mountain plant, you want to grow it on that same cornfield on the eastern shore at 0 elevation, it's not going to work. The plant will not die, but it's not going to flourish. You don't get the best quality plant. Oops. Okay, well, do you have any questions? Nope. Other thing, farmers, when you start growing herbs and you don't have a medicinal herb education, you probably are not familiar with what part do I actually use. I have been guilty of that myself. When I just started, I thought, well, the flowers of the bicolor skullcap, that's what I use because I use the flowers of the regular skullcap. Nope, bicolor skullcap, you use the roots. The photo on the left, this is cotton root. Cotton root, you use the roots, not the cotton, not the leaves. You don't even use the whole roots, you use the bark of the root. So this stuff that you see here is the root bark. You want to know that because if you start planning your time and your harvest, and you don't know what part you're using, you also don't know how much work is it going to be to produce this. Know what part is the roots, rhizomes, leaves, with or without stem? Is it the flowers? Is it the bark or only the inner bark? That's even worse. This actually should only have been the inner bark. That's a lot of work. Is it all above ground parts? It's easy, you just cut it off and you're done. Or is it the whole plant? The whole plant seems easy, then you have to pull it out and you can use everything. Some occasions you can start out with using the leaves and the flowers, and then later in the season you use the roots or the rhizomes. How to get to your herbs. Let's see how I do on the time. Okay, I can probably go a little slower. I'm always afraid that I run out of time. How to obtain your herbs. The photo on the left is one of our students harvesting the bacopa. Actually, she's not harvesting it. We planted the bacopa, which is a tropical plant. We planted it in the field while it was really warm. In the fall, when it was getting cold, we wanted to take it out. And what she's doing is exactly the same as what you will be doing when you go to a botanical garden. Probably not a good idea. When you go to an area where you know this certain plant that you want is growing, you can take out some of them. Don't ever take out every plant. You take your little shovel and you take them out with the roots. You keep the roots moist and then you plant them in your area. That's one way to get them. The advantage is if you can kind of steal them like this way or receive them from a friend, it's you have a plant, you have a start. So it's easy. Other ways of doing it by seeds, of course. Make cuttings. Cuttings is when you have an elderberry and you cut off a branch and you plant that. We'll talk more about that. You could also make cuttings of this bacopa by just taking some of the stems with some leaves. You can buy plugs. I never really used to do this. I've become more a fan of it because it's absolutely very easy to just buy 24 or 72 young plugs and plant them. It saves an enormous amount of time. It's more expensive. I think like a 24 plugs will be like $50. It depends what plant you have. You buy peppermint plugs. It's a little cheaper. You can wild harvest plants or cuttings. That's basically what we're doing here. If you would do this in the wild, then you find you're going out on your kayak and you see some skullcap growing and you take them out. That's wild harvesting plants. If you do that, please do not take all of them out. Just take very, very few out. So you leave at least half of them, if not more. You get them from friends or from gardens. That's a very good way of getting plants. You have a befriended herbalist that has some plants and you just ask them, can I have some? And then you can buy plants, which I never do because it's the most expensive way. Buy the plugs, the small plants is much cheaper. In either case, no matter how you get them, you need to make sure, absolutely sure, if you want to start selling your herbs to other people than your friends, you have to make absolutely sure that you have the correct plant. So don't think, well, I think this kind of looks like bacopa, but then it's not this kind of bacopa, it's the bacopa that is being sold for the flowerings. Then your bacopa plants look nice, but they have no medicinal value. So always make sure you know what you're getting. If you do a cutting from an elderberry, make sure what kind of cultivar you have. It seems easy to just ask somebody, hey, what is this? But you're not always right. It's what you need to know. You need to, before you start growing them, you need to learn how an herb looks. You need to know how an herb smells. You need to know how the roots are going to look like, just so you can identify what you're doing. Even if you buy plants, you cannot always trust what you're getting. Let me see if there are any chats. Nope. When to start seeds? I have to admit, this beautiful, clean, perfect looking greenhouse is not my greenhouse. It's also not the school's greenhouse. It's a greenhouse of a flower grower. And they are growing. I had asked them to please be so kind to get me the starters for the calendula, which are these. When to start seeds? I know I get my first seed catalog in December, and I'm like ready to start buying, ready to start planting, but it's probably not a good idea. It depends the seeds when you can start them. Let me take all these things up. I have more. There you go. Cold stratification, cold conditioning. That means a seed will only do well, will only emerge if it has gone through a cold period. Now, there's a lot of the native plants and a lot of the plants that are native to a cold area, like a plant that's native to, say, Norway. If you want to grow it here, you have to let it go through a cold period. If a plant is native to Florida, it's not very likely that they need to have frost in the winter. It's basically, you can be sure it doesn't need that. All the plants I mentioned here, they come originally from areas where it gets just cold in the winter. And all the native plants fall underneath this, or fall under this. I mentioned a couple. Chamomile, most people don't know chamomile actually do much better when they go through a cold period. We'll talk more about chamomile. Red sage, Bicos colecaps, bupleurum, those are all Chinese herbs. China has every climate you can come up with, I believe, but they definitely have a cold climate up more north, and that is where these plants are growing. So you want to grow them with cold. Now, if it's already warm and you forgot to do this, or you're just starting and you're just buying your seeds, or you live in Florida and you want to grow these plants, most of them you can put in soil, in moist soil in the refrigerator and let them sit there for a month. And then you plant them. It's a very good system for skullcap. I always do that, or not always, very often do that with skullcap. The disadvantage if you do that is you don't have your separate seeds, because you empty the bag in a little baggie with soil, and then you put that in the refrigerator. Some people put them in the freezer. I never do that. I have not found a plan where that is really necessary. If you buy these seeds, you buy your agrimony seeds in May because you just decided you really needed agrimony because you have like a patient that needs a plant. Still put them in the refrigerator for 2 weeks and then plant them, and then just hope that it was enough. Or keep them longer and then plant them later. There's a lot of examples of this. No heat required, which means plant that really, they don't need no heat, they don't need no specific cold. You can plant them in early to mid-spring. It's too early for most of them to plant them tomorrow. I know you guys are all going to be excited, and next week you're like, I'm going to plant these seeds. Before you do that, think for a little bit, because we most likely get more frost. I'm in the eastern shore of Maryland, so we're still in the winter. I think we get more snow next week. So you want to be aware of their natural requirements. One thing I have to say, do not just blindly follow the instructions on your seed package. They, first of all, are not always correct. Second, some of the larger companies don't consider that you will be able to plant this outside directly. They always think hoop houses, and you don't need a hoop house. Some of the herbs that you buy are not grown in this area, so that's not even mentioned how you should be growing them. Then the other thing is there's, I think horticulturists and herbalists, they are famous for the disagreements. You can pretty sure say that 50% of the seeds we as growers do not agree amongst us how to grow them. So figure out what is the best system, for your land, for your climate. It's really it's a learning process. And if you're the first year growing, then follow what I tell you. If you live here in this area, if you're in Maine, you probably don't listen to the seasons, but realize how cold is it in February in the Eastern Shore. When will it be that cold in Maine? It's probably April. I don't know. Anyhow, let's go to the next one. Heat required.
Henriette, we have a question. We have a participant who has received an old seed packet that are 2.5 years old. They've been stored in the basement and they want to know if it's still usable or how can they determine if the seeds are still viable.
Okay, thank you. My first response would be yes. I think it will still probably not do as good as it originally did, but you won't lose that much. So I would try it. If you want to make sure, you can do a little test. It would have been handy if I had included it in here. You put them on a paper towel, a moist paper towel. You put a number that you remember. You put like 10 or 20 seeds in there. You fold the towel, the paper towel, and you put them in a plastic bag and you keep them in a room. You can either keep them in the light if it's a light dependent. If it's not light dependent, then keep them in a dark spot. And then after 2 or 3, you keep on checking. Keep on checking because it might be too moist, might be too dry. Keep it moist. After 2 or 3 days, you should see a tiny, tiny little root coming or emerging out of the seeds. Then you know, yes, they will be okay. Then you can count, okay, I started out with 20. I only kept 10 of those little roots. That means 50% of your seeds is not viable anymore. So I hope this works. It's you can also put them on a saucer and keep the saucer moist. For me, that has been hard because I don't have the discipline to constantly check if my saucers are still moist enough. That's why I fold them and do them in a baggie. Don't put them somewhere really hot if it's a cold requiring plant. So follow the instructions. Follow if it requires cold or heat. Thank you. That was a good question. I'm glad you asked that. Where were we? Heat required, greenhouse or heating pad. You can easily, if you have a small area in your home, buy a heating pad and put them on there. Direct seed and warm soil outside, clear, go outside and plant them. Black seed has a question mark. Basically because in all honesty, I really want to grow black seed. I have never really been able to do that because I either plant them in the cold or plant them in the warmth. It's not doing well. And I keep on trying. I know it's a plant that's grown in the Netherlands where I'm from. And I know they plant them when it's cool. But when I plant it when it's cool, they don't do well. So I don't know what's going on. If anybody knows, please shoot me an email and tell me the secret. But this is an example. It really depends your circumstances. And just keep on trying. If you want to have it for real, then do that. The cotton and the tulsi, down here for the cotton, we have the rule, plant them out when the farmers start planting their soybean seeds. And so far that has been pretty good. This year I'm going to plant them like a week before the farmers plant their soybeans, which is an issue because I don't know when they plant the soybeans, but it's mostly in somewhere in the beginning of June. I want to do them a little bit earlier, even although it might be too cold, but I'm really want to have those flowers. Same for hibiscus. Late spring in greenhouse. When you plant anything late spring in a greenhouse or in the hoop house, make sure it's not going to be too warm because they might like warmth, but too much is never a good thing. Yeah, I've been going towards the planner, checking my time. We're still good. This actually was really surprising. I showed this photo to somebody this morning, and that person was like, "Man, that's cool. That is like really easy to propagate elderberries. Those are elderberry cuttings. I put the plugs in a bag with organic soil. I let them sit for, I don't remember. I let them sit too long, but I think it was about 8 weeks that I started cutting out the first one and planted them. And they they did okay. It's an easy way. It's a really easy way. You don't have to fill up your pots, and it works. Okay, planter. We were talking planter. So when do you do these elderberries? Since I'm talking about it, the cuttings. You can make cuttings in this period now, between now and you basically have 3 weeks. If you are in my climate, if you are more higher up in more towards Western Maryland, you have a little bit more time because it's not going to get warm that early. You plant them like this, so you plant them in the soil directly. We'll talk more about it. Plugs. So say you have ordered your plugs. You have gone to Johnny Seed, you have ordered your peppermint plugs. You will not receive them until it's no longer freezing. They do not mail any plugs while it's freezing. So as soon as you get it, there's no frost chance, plant them. If you're talking about go to cola or the bacopa, what we mentioned earlier, they are tropical plants. You cannot plant them outside in April. You wanna plant them in the greenhouse first. Anyhow, when you have a plug, it's better to have a step, unless they're peppermint. Peppermint is extremely viable. It's hard to kill. Sometimes it's better to put them in a pot as a transfer between the nice area where they were grown. Then they go into a mailbox. Then they go into your garden. That is too much on them. So you want to create a step in between. Not for all of them, but for definitely the tropical ones. Roots and rhizomes, yeah, you want to plant them now. If you order them, they will mail rhizomes in the winter. I think. Yes, I'm pretty sure about it. You order them and you plant them. It depends. You can plant them directly in the soil. It's also better to plant them in a pot where you put soil in that is either sandy or not sandy, depending where your plant is growing naturally. You plant them in a pot, and as soon as you see the leaves come out, you check if the roots are sufficiently grown that they will survive. Some of them, I remember getting the wild yam, and I planted them right away because it was in the fall. And they need to have this cold period to go through. So it really depends what you have. I'm sorry, it seems I say that an awful lot. It depends what you have. If you have questions, by the way, since you are joining me in this class, if you have questions while you're planning, you're thinking, and over the weekend you're like, oh, I should ask her. I wish I knew this. Just send me an email. I think everybody has their email, and I will hopefully give you a better answer than it depends. Cuttings, that's the things we have here. Willow cuttings, elder cuttings, the best thing in my opinion is to plant them directly in the soil. Cuttings have a hard time to transfer from cutting to plant. The roots are not very often not developed while you already see the leaves. So you want to make sure that you have roots when you have a cutting, and you want to make sure that the roots are big enough. Even then, when you transfer them, make sure you have some surrounding soil of the roots while you're transplanting them. You cannot take them and then put them in your spot in the garden or in your land. They're not going to do well. That's the problem when you propagate plants in water. Willow will do very well. If you put a willow in water, you can leaves and roots. Not all of them will survive when you transfer them. Cuttings, yeah, okay. Green cuttings, those are the cuttings of the new sprouts of a plant. You can do that in the mid to late spring before it gets really warm. When you do that, you plant them in a pot and you put a plastic cover over them. And then you keep controlling them that they stay moist, but not too moist. You can be very successful with that if you missed your period for in the early period. Yes, I realize I'm throwing a lot of information out here. This guy's William. William is standing in front of the sun hemp, and behind the this here. I don't know if you can see that behind the one special kind of the tulsi. I found this a spectacular photo because William is like 6 feet something. So you see the sun hemp gets huge. Now you wonder, when can I want these plants? When can I plant them? And I have an overview. There is an Excel sheet that I can share with you because it's a document. I could not post it on here. Why would you even plant cover crops? For me, cover crops are extremely important to increase or to improve the structure of the land. If you use a land that has been used for the same corn that we were just talking about, or it has been just a soccer field, or worse, a swimming pool, you want to, the easiest way to improve the soil for long term is by cover cropping. And if you want to do that now, February, plant your oats. If you're more up warmer, you probably want to delay it a little bit. I'm not going to do it. I planned on doing it this week. I'm not going to do it because they say we get snow again. So it's going to be the end of February. I really don't want to do it in March, because then what happens if you do that, it is too warm when your cover crop is really growing very well. If you grow barley, for instance, in the next example, if they start growing, they won't be able to get a growth spurt in before it gets really hot. When it gets really hot, then they will die off. So you want to have as much green, as much root, as much roots as possibly while they are in the soil. That's why it's important that you plant them on time. And it's always, every year, I think every farmer misses deadlines for planting anything. So don't feel bad if that happens. It happens to all of us. Very early spring, end of spring till midsummer, sunflowers, sun hemp. So those are the plants that their seeds will not emerge until the soil is warm. Midsummer plants are plants that can grow in the heat, but then will continue to grow and set seeds or grow their roots later in the fall. Now, if you wake up in beginning of November and you're like, oh my God, I didn't plant any cover crops, which happens because you want to keep like your tulsi for as long as you can. My final year solution is rye. Winter rye, it's not my most preferred plant, but it's at least something to protect the soil. It's something that adds organic material to the plant. Notice how cover crop can be medicinal. That's the perfect thing of oats. You plant a cover crop and you can use it. Now, if you start a cover crop, if you start a cover crop, before you start, think about how you're going to get rid of the cover crop. If you have oats and you don't get rid of your oats, you're going to have little mini oat plants everywhere for the whole season. So are you able to mow it down and take it away? Are you able to harvest absolutely every seed of the oats? You won't. So what are you going to do? What did we do with this crazy hemp or sun hemp? We didn't let it stand because it would just have fallen. We mowed it down with a large mower, and then we cut it in pieces with that same mower, because we don't really have any other tool to do that here at the university, because we don't do that much cover crops. That's the problem. The same problem with your what else do we have here? Turnips. Turnips, you don't really have to worry that much about it. Most of your turnips will not become huge, so you can leave them in the soil and they will rot away and they will just add more material to your soil. Mustard, I have done mustard. Mustard, if you do not know how you're going to deal with your mustard seeds, do not even think about planting mustard, because it's a total invasive. So really be sure you're aware of you have a plan. So it's February. You're thinking about what am I going to do in October? So it's really growing herbs. Being a farmer is a real seasonal thing. Seasonal meaning you always think, not always, but you have to think 2 seasons ahead. It's like a chess game. You want to think 2 sets ahead of time, or 3 or 4 if you're really good. And for a farmer, you want to start in February this year. You probably want to start thinking about February next year. All right, we are now just starting to think about. Now, this is the Excel sheet that I have. I cannot share a link because there is no link. I don't even remember where I got it from. So if you want to have this, and I would really absolutely advise you to ask me for this. It says, like, when can you plant? If you decide you want to have legumes, you are looking into this, and then you see here when you can plant them. All right, no matter what you grow, you will need to have this. This photo was me in my first year of growing herbs on a larger scale, and I had my chickens still running out free, who never ever never jumped into these seed flats for whatever reason. But I wouldn't advise you to do it. We had a cover above it, so that worked really well. They were protected from the worst rain, and they were protected from the worst sun. It wasn't a good solution because the wind blows, with a storm, the wind blows the rain, and it's just too much on the smaller tropical plants that I was growing. So if you will need to have this. Okay, let me go. Obviously, you will need to have seeding soil. You need to decide, do you want to buy seeding soil or do you make it yourself? There's enough recipes for seeding soil. What are you going to grow in? Are you going to use these kind of flats, or are you going to use the flats that don't have the plugs in it? There's a lot of decisions to be made. I like to grow in flats currently without these, because it seems to me that a lot of my herbs do better when they are not split up from their neighboring seeds. I have a feeling there's some kind of energy going on in these flats. And definitely for the native plants that I'm growing, I rarely put them in these plug things. I do use them for calendula. I do use them for the tulsis. I do use them for plants where I want the roots to go down and not spread out. You need to have signs. You're going to forget what your plants are. You have to use a horticultural pen, because whatever other pen, it will evaporate. You need to keep a system, because if you're serious and you want to go into sales and you want to get a license, or you want to get GAP certificate, whatever, you will have to have a record. So you will have to write down, I planted my skullcap February the 6th, and I planted them here in this soil. It's also good for yourself to just know what you're doing. You need to be ready on transfer, so you have to have your planting soil ready while you're growing your seeds. You need to have some kind of watering system. I plant the plants, the herbs that don't need extreme cold. I plant them in a small greenhouse that I have covered with a severe shade cloth, so there's really not much sun and heat coming in. And I have a sprinkling system on top of it, so I can turn it on and off, and I don't have to be there all the time. Problem of having seeds is they're like babies. You have to take care of them day in, day out. So make sure, if you have a regular job from 9 to 5, that there is somebody or a system that keeps your seeds moist. And one system to do it is have a spraying, what you call it, in spray system on top, sprinkler system on top, and you can have a little timer, which I have, to make sure they get watered sprinkled every 2 hours or whatever. Side effect of a sprinkling system is it also keeps the temperature down. Now, for the plants that need heat, I have a heating path in that same greenhouse that I turn on a certain temperature, and that's how they get their heat. It works pretty good.
Henriette,
yes.
we have a question.
Yes.
A participant wants to know, do you use compost mulch?
Compost mulch in my seeding soil?
She didn't specify.
But I guess so, because we're talking seeding, soil seeding. I do use compost mulch if I know for sure that it's clean. I do not use my own compost in my seeding soil because I don't trust it. I made it myself, and I know it does have seeds in it, and it might have fungi growing in it. But if you have a good quality, some stores sell really good quality compost, then yeah, go ahead and use it. Just be aware that you don't use too much of it when you make your own mixture, because you don't want your soil to be too rich. So I hope that answered. The bottom of this list, it says a plant press. Make sure you have it. You're going to need it, because if you start selling and you need to be able to prove that your ashwagandha is actually ashwagandha, you want to have proof of your plant, which means you have a plant press. So when your plant is grown, you pull it out with the roots and you put it in a press. It's fun. Kids like doing that. Yeah, don't forget that you're gonna need people. Oh, here's the soil. I need to make some speed up here.
Henriette?
Yes.
I'm sorry, we have another question. Do most herbs need compost?
It really depends. Again, there we go. If you grow burdock, you want compost. If you grow elderberry, you want compost. If you grow tulsi, you don't really need too much compost. You can use compost for soil improvement. If you use compost with like still chicken manure in it, if it's a rich compost, don't use it for the plants that will grow too fast because they're fed too much. Then we go back to one of my beginning slides, where you want to imitate the natural circumstances, and compost and rich fertile soil is not always what the plant wants in order to create those constituents that you want, because you're growing a medicinal plant. A vegetable farmer wants compost because then the plants are bigger. You don't always want compost because your plants need to be strong and not big. What I do sometimes though, is I add an artificial organic fertilizer. If I know my seeds are gonna grow slow and they will stay in that plug or in that flat for more than 4 weeks, I always add a little bit of fertilizer, like a quarter of what the package says, and add that, so the plants, when they start getting the shape like this photo, they will start growing. And in order to create that 4th and 5th and 6th leaf, they will start needing some food. I think you all get this presentation and a record of this, so read it over. One thing important, always, your seeding soil really needs to drain well. You can add some mycorrhizal fungi if you want. That's really, really good. You can add minerals. You can play around with it, or you can just buy it. Outside flats, I always add natural soil to my seeds. I always do that. I know I probably will get some other seedlings coming out, but the native plants want that native soil surrounding them. I feel it's better. Potting soil, yes, if you use the bags that have become so popular, do not use just your regular garden soil or your regular soil in there because it will dry out. You will have to make a mixture that has something that holds on to moisture, something that let it drain really well. So I do a couple of examples. Coconut coir, rice hulls for drainage. It works. We're going into plants. Let me see. We have 15 more minutes. Okay. Do we have any questions on the preparations or your soil or anything? I see no chat. So if you start thinking more and you're like, okay, I have a question, please just email me.
Henriette, most people have been sending questions in the Q&A, which I'm responding to or interrupting you for.
Okay, well, let me see if there is anything that I should be answering. Q&A. Yes, it did. Okay, you answered them. Okay. Okay, thank you, Crystal. If you don't know the answer, let me know. Here we are in the photo is in, like, what is this? June. This is the skull cap. This is right before you want to harvest them. This was in a period where I grew everything in those wooden boxes at my farm. I haven't told. I also own Habanero Farm, which is we grow herbs and we create teas. We're very small. We once in a while get flooded, and that was my main reason to start growing in these boxes. Until the flood really came and my boxes flooded away. So it didn't really help. The advantage of having a closed area is your weeds from your path won't grow in there as quick. Anyhow, skullcap, just an example of a plant that you buy your seeds tonight, you get them next week, you can plant them in a flat outside like tomorrow if you want. They like cold air. Make sure you know where you're going to plant them. If you only have full sun, they're not going to do very well. They like a little more shady area. Yes, I see something. I'm going over this slide in January. Purchase seeds now and plant them, in this case. Either fill flat with soil, spread seeds, cover slightly, leave outside protected from worst weather. Yeah, you don't want to have, you can have snow on top of them, but like hailstorms are really not good. Overdose of water is really not good. So I put them a little bit protected. There's one thing very important here, mice. You don't think about it. Mice love seeds. Any seed packet you have, keep them in a container, a plastic container, so the mice cannot get to them. If you have flats and you have you see mice close by, do something about it. I'm not going to tell you what you do about it, but you do not want to have mice in your seeding area. Cats can be a problem because it's such a cool little box, that seed box that you just created. So be careful. I go back to the skull cap. You plant them now. You only cover the seeds slightly. They're not really light dependent. They also don't really like dark. It's like just a little bit on top of it. March, if you put them in a bag, plant them from the bags. In April, they start growing. If you planted them in a flat, so you have 100 plants spread out in your flat, you have to singulate them, which means you take them out one by one and you plant them in a plug or in a pot. And then when they start growing again, when they start having like 5, 6 leaves, then you can plant them outside. Make sure when you plant any kind of little seedling, your soil really needs to be weed-free. You can plant them in a cover if you want. I have done that with the skull cap. I planted them a little further apart from each other, which wasn't an issue. I plant them in paper or I plant them in the plastic ground cover. First harvest in June, July, to have your second harvest. You might get a third harvest. The bigger the plants are, the less weed pressure there is. And in the fall, so basically you don't want to wait till the fall. You make a decision now. Do you want to grow this as a perennial? In that case, you leave them, or do you want to grow them as an annual? In that case, you let them die or die off, and you probably remove them, or you till the land where you had them, and then you plant a cover crop. You can keep them as a perennial. It's a native plant when you are in Maryland or up north, because skullcap will emerge later in the season than most of your weeds. It is a lot of work to keep them as a perennial. You think it's easy to grow perennials, but it's not really. It really depends the plant. If you have mint, it's very easy to grow as perennial because those things are crazy. They come up as soon as the snow disappears. Skullcap doesn't come back in nature until April, and every single weed is already coming up before that. So think about it. If you leave them in your plastic, I've never done that. It's probably an idea. Don't really like to do that, but you could.
Henriette,
Yes.
we have a question
Yes.
asking your thoughts on using livestock, such as ducks or chickens, to help suppress weeds.
Yeah, you saw my chickens on the other photo. The problem with doing that, there's two problems. You need to prevent that they eat your crop that you want to keep. They're not going to graze. A chicken is not coming in here and start scratching in between the skullcap plants. They don't care where your skullcap plants are. So they're going to totally demolish this. A regulatory issue is if you want to become GAP certified, which is a good idea to do, then there is no, you're not allowed to have any animals in that garden or on that farm, which means no dogs, no cats, no chicken, no goats, nothing. If you have them walk there in the winter, you're still not safe for the GAP, and you're not safe for a user neither, because the compost that they leave, the poop that they leave, is containing a lot of bacteria, and they haven't disappeared when you start picking your skullcap. I will be very careful with it. If you know you're going to grow herbs, or you're going to grow elderberries in the fall of 2025, yeah, you can have goats on that land now, but they have to be gone like half a year before you start harvesting. There's time limit. I will be very careful. Definitely goats and chickens they're violent. We have 7 more minutes. Oops. California poppy. I love this plant. That's why I included it. It's so beautiful. You purchase your seeds. You have some time. In February, you start preparing the area. California poppy needs cold. You can plant them. I wouldn't do it now, but you can plant them in the end of February. I say he creates straight lines. You don't have to create straight lines if you don't want to, but it's easy to weed. If you know where your seeds are, then you can weed in between. So if there are like a foot apart, your lines, which you want to be, it can even be a little bit more. You know exactly where your seeded area is and where your weeds are. If you have any volunteers working with you, go over how the seedlings look. Not 1 time, not 2 times, but like 10 times, because you have to be prepared on them pulling out your cute little seedlings. You plant them, you keep them weed-free. In April, you thin them. The thinning of the plants is something that is very hard for me because I feel like I'm killing them, and I am killing them. But I'm pulling them out so the ones that are still there are going to have enough space to grow into healthy, large plants. So that's what you do with your little seedling, and really look online to know how your seedlings are looking. You recognize them. End of May, first harvest of flowers and leaves. You will get a second flower. Again, make a decision if you want to grow California poppy as a perennial. If you, obviously, if you harvest the roots, your plant is gone. They do well as a perennial. If you have a separate area, there's less weed pressure than with the, they grow faster than with the skull cap. You can do it. But the negative side of it is they're not going to be everywhere where you had them. And they also move. You plant them here, you find them back in the middle of whatever area. Let me see. German chamomile, you want to plant your German chamomile. You want to go out now as soon as this webinar has ended and plant your chamomile if you're in this area. It's exaggerated, but you want to plant them before the end of March. The earlier, the better. The earlier you plant them, the stronger your plants are. They're very, 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 very fine seeds. I mix them with playground seeds. Playground sand. So you have a handle on them. And then you spread them out, the same thing. When they start growing, you will pull out some of the ones to get them on a long distance. You could plant them in April, but your plants are going to be less strong and less high. Same thing, before you plant an acre of chamomile, think about how you're going to harvest them. Same thing, do you want to keep them as a perennial? Then the advantage is you will have a second harvest in the fall, but they're not going to be a very full field. Lemon balm, I'm going to run over this because we are at the end. Lemon balm, plant your seeds, they're light dependent, plant them, and you never ever be able to get rid of them. So think about that too. Where do you want them? Will you be able to keep them under control? The sad thing is when you harvest them every year, the plant will lose their growing force after 3 years. So then you take new cuttings, or you take the smaller plants and plant them probably in the same row or in a different area. What else do we have? Lavender. Yeah, lavender, I would say plant by the plugs. I mean, we always grow them from seeds, but it's a risky business. It's fun though to do because they look cute as little and they smell good already. We have a few minutes. For lavender, make sure you write down what kind you have and make sure you remember that. Now, to get them through the winter, when you are in a moist area like we are, make sure their branches are not falling on the soil, because that's how they start rotting. I think. Oops. Yeah, I haven't even done this. Oh my goodness. Let's do. I'll make sure you all have this, and then I will go over the annual planning. That was the whole goal of this first one. I will go over this at the next week. We do the second class next week. I will include this because this is important, and it will go relatively quick, but not quick enough to do in 1 minute. Is there any question? Crystal, do you have any question?
I do not have any standing by now.
Okay, so I will show you this. The one thing you really now have to start thinking about, and this is basically your homework for next week. Think about your planning. You really, I know we are very excited people. We really want to start growing herbs. We have these ideas. It's going to be beautiful. Think about your next step. As soon as you do one step, at the same time, think about your next step. It's probably not what you want to do. I would much rather just throw them seeds out and get them plants and harvest them. That's not how it works. Sorry. Think about it. One thing to think about is I have February already at the end. Let me go there. February, hope for snow. Snow is the best protection. We got enough of it. You can plant your oats. You can plant your cold-needing seeds, skullcap, blue vervain, and a lot of the Chinese herbs. You could still harvest your roots from last year if you haven't gotten to it. It doesn't matter. They're fine in the soil. Find helpers. Make sure you have enough people, either volunteers or you hire people. Make sure you make your plan the same size as the number of people that are helping you. If it's just you, don't make your plan bigger than what you can deal with. It's frustrating, very frustrating, and it really doesn't help your motivation when you see plants die or you don't harvest them because you have lack of people. So that's it for today. I hope to see all of you next week. Again, I will make sure that you guys know, if you want to have the overview of the cover crop, send me an email. We can probably send it to everybody. I think I can do that. If you don't get it this afternoon, then you will have to send me an email. I will try to send it to you right now.
Henriette, can you post your contact information, please?
Oh, yes. Chat.
And we have a request to go back on the slide. Please let us know how many slides you need us to go back.
That's me?
Yes, ma'am.
How many slides do we go back? Did we know?
Nope, they haven't said. One, please. No, just on the, I think on the schedule.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe it's good to look at March, so you start thinking about it. Yeah, I don't know how far what the question is, so I can't answer that. The one thing you need to think about also is how are you going to grow them? Are you growing? What is the most important thing of your garden? Do you want it to look nice and romantic and you have like flowers in between? Or are you going to be very economical and straightforward? If you are the last one, you want to have straight lines of everything. All your beds are just lines. So you can run through it with a mower in between the path. You can just roll out your ground cover. If you want to have a really nice looking place where the harvest is number 2 and not number 1, go for circles and squares and just make it a little bit more creative.
Okay, we have more questions popping up. Please show the next slide as well.
Okay.
And someone asked for the calendar June and on, so I think this probably covers that.
Okay. Yeah, people can look at it later too.
Yes, I'm reminding them.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And we'll talk more about it, but like the seedlings of Tulsi, for instance, holy basil, you can continue to plant them through the whole summer if you want. So this is just like rules, but there is a lot of interpretation to the rules. All right, I'm going to end this. Thank you all for being with me. Please make sure there is a live class here at UMES in Princess Anne. You will all, I think you have seen that. We will come to the farm here at the end of April on a Saturday, and we will actually share how we plant, how we make a bed, how we harvest, because hopefully we have something to harvest. And it's really the practical, get your hands dirty day. And it'd be fun to talk with everybody else who is growing herbs. So thank you all, and I'll see you next week, Wednesday, 12 o'clock.